Okay, I'm going to cover basic skull anatomy and construction. And I'm going to give you 6 fairly easy steps that after this lesson, you'll be able to understand the skull, draw it on the paper convincingly with authority, and pretty quickly. So let's get into it. We're going to be wanting to draw our figures like we're telling a story. And if we're doing that, then the head is chapter 1. What people usually do is they just they do a gesture, and they do a beautiful gesture of the body and get that going, and they leave the head and just throw it on at the end. And usually it's the wrong size, wrong placement. It's not characteristic of the head. And so no matter how much structure you put on it, if you don't put it on in the beginning and do it carefully, it's just going to get thrown on and look bad. So what we need is 6 easy steps. Okay, we have to start with the very basic. And the first one is just to determine the attitude and the orientation of the head. So we just start with a center line. Okay, basic center line with an oval that's characteristic of the proportion of the head. And we can establish the tilt left or right of the head pretty easy. So we've got straight, and then we've got tilt left, tilt right. Okay, no problem. From there, we're going to determine the forward and backward tilt of the head. That's step 2. So we'll use an ellipse now combined with the first step. And you're going to make the ellipse at a right angle to the center line, right? And the proportions are 3 units high to 2 inches or to 2 units wide. That's generally the proportions of the head. And when we use now this ellipse, we're going to be drawing over the surface to make this thing look dimensional. So a contour line is the overall outside line containing a shape. But a cross contour, what I'm putting in now, that goes across the inside of the form, but over the form. So like an ant crawling over a form, right? And so if we draw that ellipse at right angles to the center line, and we draw over the front side and also give a hint as if we're drawing in glass to the back side, it's going to look 3D. Okay, so again, we're establishing the tilt left and right, but not only that, we're adding forward and backward. So this is the head tilting forward. So we've got that center line, ellipse at right angles to that, and we're darkening up that front line, part of the ellipse, to make it look like that's closer to us than that back line that I drew a little bit thinner and more faint. And so now we have a direction, clearly looking up, clearly looking down, and that's good stuff. And that gets the head on the paper quick, right? If you're doing storyboards, you want to work quick. If you're doing thumbnails, quick. And this is your quick start. That's all you need. If you like the placement and attitude of the head at this point, then you can just go forward and start adding more detail. You can start sculpting it out with the planes, then you can add the features and so on. So step 3 is kind of a 3/4 front, and you're going to notice that the head, the skull, the basic construction is like basically an egg shape. Okay, so we can check it out here on an actual skull anatomy here in 3D. And so we've got that egg shape, and it's a little wider in back than it is in the front. And you can see there's this structure pulling off that egg shape. It's kind of if we break it down, it's a cylinder. If we look at it in 3/4, you can see that there's a superstructure, if you will, pulling off of the egg shape. That's the cheekbone or zygomatic arch. the eye sockets and the maxilla, which is the tooth cylinder or barrel of the mouth. So again, we can see that cylinder pulling off of the basic egg shape of the cranium or skull, and the tooth cylinder or barrel of the mouth. Okay, coming back to Photoshop. And so again, to make it appear 3D, I'm going to draw cross contours over the outside form, both vertically and horizontally, and that's going to give us that sense that this thing is 3D, kind of a 3D object, the illusion of it. All right, there's our tooth cylinder pulling off. So it's the egg plus the cylinder. Simple, right? It's easy to remember. Don't make it so complicated, right? Just think of like you're a sculpting drawer and you're using 2D shapes to get it on the page quick, and then sculpt those 2D shapes into 3D forms. And once we have those two things established, we can start drawing that superstructure that's pulling off. Right? It makes up the eye socket, the eyebrow, and the cheekbone. It looks like it's kind of like a pair of sunglasses. You have to draw it a few times to get kind of used to what it is and where exactly the parts fit and how they connect to the cranium. For example, the cheekbones dovetail into the tooth cylinder is something that blends in, and it's not completely obvious at the connection point. And then the skull is hollow right behind that superstructure or eye socket. So that goes behind. So I'm going to give that a modeling tone to push that back in space and let that architecture of the sunglasses kind of come forward. And just do a little cross hatching there for that. This is tricky to do because a lot of this it's covered up obviously by skin, muscle, and fatty tissue. So we got to get underneath that and do a little analyzation here. It's going to help us out. So now I'm going to go in and basically put in the eye sockets, right? Keeping it simple. And again, this will be something you'll have to do a number of times, looking at the skull, looking at pictures of the skull, and then trying to draw it. So if we're careful, we have everything kind of connected and we just think it through, it'll start to come together and make sense. Slowly but surely. So we've done up to 5 steps now. That step number 5 was pulling the superstructure off of the cranium. And now we're going to analyze it from its basic planar construction. And it's basically an egg or an oval with a triangle thrown on. And the first thing we're going to do is swing an arc. And this is going to be really helpful. Remember, we're drawing through, drawing over to make things look 3D. And then we're going to cut that side plane off the head. We'll just swing an arc from the back, the cranium, all the way forward and down by the jaw. And that's going to give us that side plane of the head. Real clear, real simple. We go from the general to the specific, the big to the smaller and smaller refining facets. And the basic proportion that the eyes are there at the halfway point. Okay, so we're just going to put a sense of that in the basic average angle there, placement, kind of spacing and placing the features here. And we've drawn an arc for the brow. And then we'll give that center line down the front of the face in the three-quarter views. So we need that center line to space and place the eyes, nose, mouth that are cut down the center evenly. And then we're going to sculpt out the eye socket, cheekbone, all the way down to the chin. And just get those major breakups going. Now we're going to cut back in for that bottom part of the eye socket, down the front part of the cheek, and the chin box separating the front of the face from the side plane of the face on the jaw. Okay, it's looking solid, it's good, it's easy. We haven't wasted any time. This is, great for blocking in a portrait, getting a sense of where you want it on the page. It's good for storyboards. It's good knowledge for sculpting. If you want to be a sculptor with clay or ZBrush, if you know this stuff, you can just get in and start doing it. That's the power of knowing the basics and becoming kind of a sculpting drawer, knowing the planes, knowing the proportions, and knowing the anatomy. Okay, so there, that arc that we put through, it hits some major bony landmarks that are important. The top of the brow, right? It shows off the box, and that's what we're trying to do. And if I draw a little box, those inside corners are what's going to really give us that structure that makes it look solid and believable. And those corners, those vertices, are what this line, this arc, goes through. So it hits the top of the brow, and if it continues on, it hits that highest part of the cheekbone on that front corner of the head, and then it swings through and divides the front half of the jaw from the back half of the jaw. And the masseter muscle lies there on the back half of the jaw. That's the chewing muscle. Just put a little sense of that in, and refining the jawbone a little bit. There's the masseter there. I'm giving a little tone to. And there's that front half of the jaw. So the front half separated from the back half of the jaw. Oftentimes that's a little bit of a no man's land sometimes. So if you know where that separation is, you follow that arc through, you can give little sense of something going on there that's better than nothing many times. Okay, so that blue line is the front plane separated from the side plane of the head. Again, showing off the boxy nature of the head. It's going to have that sense of it emerging off the page like a 3D object. So I'm going to clarify that chin box, right? Giving it a front plane and a top plane, and a sense of where the rhythm of the mouth or the laugh lines are. That cuts into the nose, which we'll add later, and the rhythm of the chin and the rhythm of the mouth overlap a little bit. And then we're going to draw basically that center line, not of the front of the face, but of the tooth cylinder that bulges out away from the front plane of the face. So we're going to make sure to put that in so that our mouth, when we do put it in, looks valid. So all our construction has to be valid. So I'm kind of giving a tone there to the side and bottom of the tooth cylinder so that it looks 3D and like it's pulling away, right? Popping off the page. And the cheekbone disappears behind the tooth cylinder, and we have the brow ridge there protecting the eyes. It's kind of like that visor. And just refining as I go. It's good fun. Again, you'll have to do this along with the skull. Do it 4 or 5 times until you kind of get a handle on it. And then you'll never be baffled again by the construction of the head too much, and it'll just get better and better as you get clearer and clearer. So that nose now is going to be connected to the forehead and the brow by the glabella or the keystone. And the eye sockets on top fit into the glabella. The glabella overlaps the brow bone or top part of the eye socket. So again, just constructing things, putting in center lines, and going step by step, building slowly. So we get that nose in there now that interrupts the two eye sockets right down the middle that connects really the whole face. It sits in the middle. And it's a basic prism kind of shape. That's an easy way for me to think about it and get it on there with structure and clarity and quickly. Just make sure my construction's valid and put in a tone there so I can see it better. Right, it's got a front plane, two sides, and a bottom. And then we've got that separation from the front of the maxilla into the eye socket. Now let's do it again, showing the bone. So we did the plane, let's just do the bone part. The nasal bone is 1/3 of the top, the root of the nose coming out of the glabella is bone. And then there's a middle third and a final third where the ball of the nose and the nostrils are. That's all cartilage. So it's 1/3 bone, 2/3 cartilage. And going in to show with some tone the eye socket, how it's kind of back in space there, so that tone helps it recede. The beauty of learning the basics is that you can do it with whatever technique you want. You could use a stick if you wanted, and that's cool. There's a triangular shaped piece of cartilage that separates the two nostrils, and it's the septum. Once we get that triangular piece in there, we can start building the wings of the nose, the ball or the dome of the nose. At the tip there, that's all cartilage. The wings are more like fatty tissue. And we can erase out a little bit of the construction. Now starting to clarify the wings of the nose, the planes, from the top plane of the wing of the nose to where it turns to become a bottom plane. And again, we've got that connection between the nasal bone and the maxilla, then into the deep eye socket. Just clarifying that. Again, I always think of drawing as fixing mistakes because there's just these approximations to get it onto the page. And those are always in need of refinement. But the more you do it, the closer you get. All right, we're adding on the jaw here. 2-cylinder. Now that 2-cylinder connects to the chin. And the chin connecting, going back to the jaw. So it's not that hard. You just think of how things connect, how they overlap. And you know a little bit about the anatomy and how they look. It's amazing how much a little of that knowledge goes a long way. Again, those darkening up the sides that move away from the light, using a modeling tone, they call that, and pushing the sides back or pushing them down so they go back in space. And then using a darker tone, pushing certain parts back even further in space. Looks kind of funny with the nose looking somewhat real, but the other stuff looking like a skull. And just refining my skull. Looked a little too big in the back and a little compressed vertically, so I'm gonna stretch it up vertically and squish it horizontally just a little bit. Again, the center line, really important. And that tooth cylinder is like a barrel. It's like a sideways barrel submerged into the front of the face. And it's got its own center line, like I mentioned before, bulging out from the front plane of the face. And you can think of it also like a can of tuna. So that's vertically submerged in, whereas the barrel is horizontally submerged in. And that can of tuna idea helps me visualize the teeth a little bit better than the sideways barrel. Anyway, you can use whichever one is easiest for you, but there's a sense of where the planes turn. That's the most important thing, is getting it to look like it bulges out. Once you know the structure, you know where to put the dark shading. Instead of just guessing, you know exactly where to put it, and that's why it looks so strong and reads so well. Just giving that chin box a top plane and a front plane. Just gonna cast a shadow, put that side plane of the face into shadow here. Hopefully everything I do will, at this point, help out the structure. Basically clarify the structure. If it doesn't, figure out why, erase it, do it again. But this is the story of the skull, so everything I do should tell that story ever more clear, and it will begin to approach reality, if that's what I'm aiming for. Okay, let's just do a little profile and analyze it in terms of its planar construction. And one big mistake that students often make is that I'm going to show you here about the placement of the eye and how the brow is really a curved surface and not a flat plane. And that often causes some confusion about where the eyebrow turns from a front plane to a side plane. And it's that corner, that inside corner, that's set back away from the edge of the nose or the outside contour. And what people get wrong is that they put the eye right there by the outside contour of the profile, and they don't give enough space. So let's set that up. We'll get to that in a second. So I'm just going ahead and constructing the nose, tooth cylinder that bulges out, right, into the chin box, and then the jaw and the underside of the jaw connecting to the neck. Notice the characteristic sway of the neck, that C curve going into the skull. The ear is going to be placed on the back half of that center line that divides the skull vertically. And then we throw in that arc from the back of the ear all the way up to the top of cranium, and then through and out. And that gives us those corners of the box that we're looking for, of the brow, the cheekbone, where it turns and changes from a front plane to a side plane. And that's just an approximation, right? You can change it depending on the person's structure, the age of the person, and so on. But we're just going to build that eye socket. We're going to think of everything as construction and building. And it just has that immediate feeling of it looks valid and real. So I just pulled a rhythm off of the top of the ear. Okay, and that gives me the top of the cheekbone on the side plane. And then changing direction all the way down to the chin. And that separates out the side of the head from the front of the head in the lower part. And here's what I wanted to show you about the eye, and most people making a mistake here and placing the eye too close to the contour, right where the nose is, and it just looks awkward. It's not there. It's set back in the eye socket. So I'm gonna go ahead and respect that and push it away to the left. Okay, giving that space, giving the eye and nose some separation there. That looks much better. All right, so we basically deconstructed and constructed the skull. We've analyzed it in terms of its bony anatomy, bony landmarks. We spaced and placed the features, and then we went ahead and analyzed it in terms of its planar construction. And that's some really good stuff. That will be able to allow you to command the skull and understand it. And you can use this in storyboards, concept art, portraiture, sculpting in clay, sculpting on ZBrush. This knowledge is really crucial, and I hope it helped you big time. All right, we'll see you in the next video.